be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I, talking about God, when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destruction, plague, or anything will touch you when I strike Egypt. And the children of Israel were commanded to keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout all generations in remembrance of what the Lord has done for them. I want to put a parenthetical pause here that every now and again we should stop and remember what the Lord has brought us from. Because maybe not for all of you, but for some of you in here, the Lord has brought you from a mighty long way. You know, when you wasn't thinking about praying and God was far from your mind, that's when you thank God for a praying grandmother, a praying grandfather, a praying parent. You ought to thank God that somebody prayed for you and had you on their mind, took a little time to pray for you. You ought to thank God that his arms was long enough to pull you out of the holes that you dug for yourself. You ought to thank God that he looked beyond your faults and he saw your needs. Oh, we ought to take some time to remember what the Lord has done for us. Oh, you ought to thank the Lord that he saw your mess, but instead of seeing a mess, he saw a miracle on the inside of you. You ought to thank God that he raised you up from your sick bed. You ought to thank the Lord when you didn't see no way out, he made a way out. It should have killed you, but you ought to thank God that it didn't. You should not have survived it, but you ought to thank God that you did survive it. You deserve to be at rock bottom, but thank God he lifted you up. He picked you up and turned you around and placed your feet on solid ground. It was nobody but the Lord. You should be crazy this morning, but thank God he brought you through. Am I talking to anybody in here? Your marriage should have been over, but thank God that he came on through for you anyway. They said you wouldn't make it out this time, but thank God that he brought you through anyway. You should have lost your mind, but thank God he brought you through anyway. You may not be where you want to be, but thank God you're not where you used to be. You ought to take some time to remember what the Lord has brought you out of. The Passover meal was a reflection of what God brought them through. You ought to take some time to remember what God brought you through. He brought you through sickness. He brought you through pain. He brought you through depression. He brought you through addiction. He brought you through disease. He brought you through being broke. He brought you through being tired. He brought you through bondage. He brought you through unemployment. He brought you through fear. He brought you through bad relationships. He brought you through abuse. He brought you through destruction. He brought you out of darkness and put you into his marvelous light. You ought to look where the Lord has brought you from. See, some of you, I know, I can hear your spirit. Some of you say, well, I may never have taken a drink. I never been addicted to drugs. I may never been put in jail. But there's some things you and God only know. And if God would just expose you for a little bit, if God was to put your life on the screens, you ought to thank God for the stuff that nobody else know about but you and God. But he brought you out of it anyway. Look where the Lord has brought you from. Jesus